May. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be doing a kettlebell jerk tutorial. If you don't know what the kettlebell jerk is, stay tuned because I'm going to tell you all about what it is and how to properly perform it. And if you have any questions, I will answer those as well. So say hi when you join, whether you're joining here later on watching the replay, if you're joining me live, say hello in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. And we're going to jump in. So the kettlebell jerk exercise this exercise is most commonly used in kettlebell sport training, but it's also done in different hard style or fitness styles of kettlebell training. You may be familiar with a barbell jerk. The kettlebell jerk is different from the barbell jerk or how you would do the jerk with a dumbbell, okay? And I'm gonna explain the differences between that today and why those differences are there. Hi, Anzame, thanks for joining me. Okay, so let me grab a kettlebell here. So I want to preface this by saying that the kettlebell jerk specifically is a more advanced kettlebell exercise. So this is not something I would recommend that beginners get started with. It's something for more of an intermediate or advanced lifter. If you want to know more exercises for beginners, you want to check out my live that I did yesterday on deadlifts and squats. Those are going to be a couple of better exercises to get started with, but it could be useful to watch this just to know one of the more advanced exercises that you could learn later on in the process. Hi, old Grizz. Thanks for making it. Glad you're on time today. Must have been your interest in this tutorial. Okay, so what is the kettlebell jerk? So we're visual people. I can show you better than I can tell you. So the kettlebell jerk, it looks like this. Okay, I'll show you from the side. So what we're doing in this exercise is we're using our legs to bring the kettlebell from the rack position, which is what that's called when the kettlebell's sitting there, to the overhead position, and we're using our legs to propel that motion. So even though the kettlebell is going up over my head and I'm holding it in my arm, I'm actually not using my arm to bring it up. I'm using my arm to stabilize the kettlebell at the top and to bring it back down, but I'm really driving from the hip into the elbow, which propels that kettlebell up, and then I'm dropping down underneath the kettlebell. So this is quite a technical exercise. There's a lot of pieces to it, okay? So we're gonna break it down, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the difference between a kettlebell jerk versus a press or a push press. Okay, so a kettlebell press would be bringing the kettlebell from the rack position to overhead, but you'll notice there's no leg action. My legs are not doing anything here. So the overhead press is really an arm and shoulder exercise, okay? Versus the push press, don't want to just work my right arm today, the push press is here. So let me know if you know what the difference is between a push press and a jerk, or between a push press and a press. Okay, this is the push press. This is the press. And then, for contrast, this is the jerk. Okay, so we got no guesses? No guesses? Okay, I'll just tell you. So the difference here, the press is fully an arm exercise. The push press, or the jerk first, the jerk is almost completely a leg exercise. So you are using your arm to stabilize. You definitely are using your upper body, but the driving force of the kettlebell going up comes from the legs, and then you duck under. The push press is a combination. It's kind of between the two. So you're using your legs to initiate the exercise similar to a jerk, but you're using your arm to finish the exercise overhead. Okay, so the push press is a combo. It's going to be using both. And the push press and jerk are very similar, but they have some distinct differences. So the first part of the push press and the jerk are the same, right? So on a push press, we go here, up. On a jerk, we also go here, but we finish differently. Okay, so if you have done a lot of push presses with a kettlebell, sometimes it can be tough to transition to the jerk because it's a very similar exercise in many ways, but the pattern is different, and so that can be confusing sometimes. Okay, so we'll walk through the jerk. So there's different phases of the jerk. The first one, thinking about whether or not to hold the kettlebell while I talk about this. So the first position of the kettlebell jerk is the rack position. Okay, so the kettlebell is in rack here. Your elbow is connected to your body. You want to make sure that you have proper rack position and that your wrist is straight. Kettlebell handles diagonal across your palm, fingers are loose, and there's no space here between your forearm and the kettlebell. Like the kettlebell's resting directly onto the forearm versus if there's a gap here, that's generally going to kind of pull your wrist back and generally be a less comfortable position. You want to be fully inserted. And you want the kettlebell to sit in the V that your shoulder, your elbow, and your hand make. Okay, so the kettlebell's resting in that V. It's resting back against the body as opposed to like this, where the kettlebell is pulling you forward. You're going to get really exhausted trying to keep it there. Okay, so it should be directed back against your body and elbow connected to the hip, and that's going to become really important in the next step of the kettlebell jerk, or the next phase, which is called the first dip. So there's two dips of the legs in the kettlebell jerk, as opposed to the push press, which has one dip, and the press, which has 0 dips of the legs. Okay, so first dip is here. Okay, what we're doing in that first dip is we're preparing. We're connecting the elbow to the hip, and we're dropping down through the legs in order so that we can explode up. Okay, so I'm gonna set my kettlebell down here for a moment. So in that first dip, you want your knees to drop down and forward, and you want your elbow to connect to your hip. This is one of the differences between a kettlebell jerk and a barbell or dumbbell jerk. Okay, when you're doing a barbell jerk, the weight is up here and it's closer to the center of your body. It's closer to your midline. So with a barbell jerk, you're actually going to push your booty back before you go up. With a kettlebell jerk, you're actually going to drop your knees forward and connect that elbow to your hip, because the weight of the kettlebell is also further forward in front of your body and lower than a barbell, okay? So the weight is more heavily concentrated. The weight is also spread out more, okay? So you need a different body position. We connect on the first dip. Then we're going to do the launch, okay? Or some people may call it a triple extension. What you're gonna do from that first dip is you're going to fully extend your ankles, knees, and hips. So you're driving your hip up into that kettlebell, and then that's going to drive the elbow up and the kettlebell up, okay? And then you get your second dip where you drop under the kettlebell, and that dip looks more like the dip that you would see on a barbell or dumbbell jerk, where your hip actually is now back because the kettlebell is now closer to your midline overhead. Okay, that's the second dip, and then you finish by straightening the legs, standing up, and then you drop the kettlebell back down into the rack position. So those are going to be the basic steps of the kettlebell jerk. Hi, YouTube Punk, thanks for joining. Old Grizz, you just asked, is there a good drill for learning to get knees forward on the first dip? Absolutely. I'm going to show you that in a moment. So we have rack position, first dip, launch or triple extension, second dip, and then finish up to the top, okay? And then bell comes down to rack position. So the thing that you need to do first and foremost with a jerk, and I recommend this with all highly technical kettlebell exercises or anything that's technical with your body, is that you should essentially shadow box or shadow bell, right? When you do it. So that's kind of like a boxer would kind of shadow box and pretend he has an opponent before he's actually going in with an opponent. It's how he warms up and gets his body drilled and ready, right? Same thing with kettlebell. If you're doing something technical, leave the weight behind, understand the sequence and the timing of what you're trying to do before you try to add a weight to it, because this is a quick exercise and you can't grab a kettlebell and do it slow. Well, you can if you have a really light kettlebell like I do, but if you don't have a really light kettlebell, you can't do that. So you got to do it without the bell first, and you also need to go slow before you go fast. This is the phase that people skip when they want to do technical kettlebell moves to their own detriment, because you're never going to get it just working with the kettlebell. You need to practice it without the kettlebell first. Okay, so the first thing you would do is exactly what I just showed you. You would practice each phase in slow motion. And this old Grizz is how I would recommend practicing, getting the right sequence and practicing the first dip. So you would pretend you have your kettlebell, your shadow kettlebell, okay, your invisible kettlebell. You would go into your first dip. You go as slow as you need. The goal of the first dip is to connect your elbow more closely to your hip. Okay, so it's here. And you can think of it a little bit like, I've described it like a little bit like a plie. Okay, like you push your knees slightly outward and you connect your elbow to your hip. Okay, connect your elbow to your hip. And then from there, you're going to do your triple extension. That's going to launch the kettlebell up, so up on your toes. Yep, you're going to have to work a little bit of balance and calf strength here. And then drop down, stand tall. So your very first drill, if you want to learn to do the jerk correctly, here, 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 here. Okay, and what do you do after that? Guess what? You start to speed it up, right? You start to speed it up a little bit. Okay, what do you do after that? You get up to what real-time speed would be, okay? So if you're not able to do that first, I wouldn't recommend practicing it with a kettlebell. You should practice it, getting it from slow motion to real-time speed with the correct body position and the correct timing. So with the first dip, so I said knees forward, but actually when I'm thinking of it, you don't necessarily want to think of it as knees forward. You want to think about it as like slightly opening your hip or slightly externally rotating your hip, and then you don't want to push your hip back, because again you want to stay under the kettlebell, but so as a consequence of that, your hip is going to drop slightly forward, your knees are going to come slightly forward because you want to maintain that connection. But you don't necessarily actually want to go all the way forward like this and fully extend your hip. You actually want to keep a slight crease in your hip, because that will allow you to better drive upward. Okay, so once you have that down, then you can add the kettlebell. But before that, I wouldn't recommend adding the kettlebell. So probably for most people watching today, I wouldn't even recommend practicing with the kettlebell for quite a while. I would recommend, again, this is if you really want to get the technique down, and it's going to prevent you from having to go back later and undo bad habits. So, and it depends, you can practice this also with both arms. It depends on whether you're doing like a double. If you want to do double jerks or single jerks, you could practice first with the single and then work towards the double. But you're going to be, working here, 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 here. Okay, once you get that down, maybe it takes you a week. Okay, then you start going a little bit faster. Okay, maybe that takes you another week, or maybe it only takes you a few days because you already mastered the first part. Okay, and then you want to be able to go real-time speed. And that's when you're ready to pick up a kettlebell and start practicing with your kettlebell. Because again, there's no way to really slow it down well with the kettlebell. Hi, Marla. Thanks for joining. Okay, so once you're ready to pick up the kettlebell or kettlebells, I would recommend practicing it with a single kettlebell before you do any double kettlebell work. Okay, so one drill you can practice to get more acquainted with the first dip with the kettlebell would be practicing a bump drill. Okay, so where you're going to go ahead and bump the kettlebell and where you're practicing getting into that first dip position. It's a little bit of an awkward timing, I feel like it actually is a bit of a hard drill. I feel like it's a better drill once you better learn to understand the jerk timing. Another really great drill that you can do to work on the kettlebell jerk is doing holds in the various positions. So doing your first dip and holding for like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Doing your acceleration, or excuse me, your launch or your triple extension, holding 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, holding 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bringing it down, starting again. So you have a little bit more time to think about each phase of the movement. Another thing that's going to be really important for kettlebell jerks is your shoulder and upper back mobility. You're really going to struggle with this exercise. This is something I came across coaching people who wanted to learn kettlebell sport technique. One of the biggest things that stood in the way for the majority of people in kettlebell jerk, especially two-arm jerk, is the flexibility, the mobility in the shoulders and upper back. So I actually created a program for that. It's on my website. It's called Upper Body Mobility for Kettlebell Sport, and it has specific exercises to help you with opening up your thoracic spine and opening up your shoulders. Because if you're not able to bring your shoulders over your head without arching your lower back, you're going to have a very hard time with the kettlebell jerk, because it not only requires this, but it requires this, which is even more demanding on the upper back and shoulders. Hi, South to West. Thanks for joining us. Let me know if you guys have specific questions on the kettlebell jerk. I'll be happy to answer those. Let's see. So the body weight drill is really the first and foremost place to start. Even if you're looking to just improve your kettlebell jerk and you have never practiced that drill, like if you've practiced the kettlebell jerk many times with kettlebells, but you've never practiced it body weight and you're struggling with something about the jerk, I would highly recommend spending some time there. Okay, and then if flexibility is an issue, that's something that you want to work on as well. It's going to make it much easier for you to get the timing and the positioning, because you're going to be fighting against your own body if you're not, if your flexibility is not there, and it's going to make it very difficult to get into the right positions. Okay, and then there's the drill where you're going to take your 5-second here. And this is also just a great drill here if you want to work on your first dip with the kettlebell. It's just practicing your positioning. It can be really helpful to set up either a camera, like I have in front of me. I can watch myself in my positioning in the camera, or a mirror, or take a video of yourself and check your positioning. Okay, that does require that you know what you're looking for, and that's a bit of the challenge. Learning this type of advanced technique, you kind of have to know what you're looking for if you take a video of yourself, and it may not look exactly like what somebody else's technique looks like, but as long as the correct principles are there that you want to look for, then you're good to go. Question here, can you give me an everyday workout I can do for the next month to see a body change? I don't recommend doing the same workout every day, but I would recommend going to my other channel here and doing the follow along workouts that are there with a light to moderate weight kettlebell. You can check that out. Old Grizz, you said I'm a wider guy, hard to get arms to the hips. Any advice? You don't necessarily need to get your arms to your hips. It's optimal to get arms to the hips, but you could get arms to belly. Okay, so you want to try to get your elbows in and connected to the body, even if they're not necessarily touching the hip. However, it could be a flexibility issue as well. So making sure that you do have the flexibility in your upper back, in your hips, okay? That could be an issue there as well, but if you, there can also be body proportion issues. So you may not necessarily, some people are going to have like a shorter upper arm and you may not as easily connect to your hip. So again, that could be a combination of flexibility or it could be just body proportions. Just like There's certain people who are meant to be basketball players that are really tall. There's certain people that have better body proportions to do the kettlebell jerk, and it's just going to work better for some people than others. But if you make a connection to your body, even if it's not your hip, that's okay also. YouTube Punk asks, any visualization techniques you recommend for the jerk? Visualization. Not really. I don't really have any visualization techniques, but I would recommend, like if you're, and this is further along the path, like if you're already practicing kettlebell jerks, I do think that the breathing technique can be really helpful for the timing of the kettlebell jerk. So if the breathing is correct, it's going to be much easier to get the speed and the timing correct. So you're going to have an exhale as you go into your first dip. Then you're going to inhale as that bell drives up, and then exhale. Inhale as you stand up, exhale. Okay, so it's going to, hopefully you can hear this. You can let me know if you can hear it, but it's going to sound like this. Okay, so that is something that for me is a really useful like auditory cue to myself. So it's not a visual one, but it's an auditory cue that can help you with the timing. And so if you don't have that breathing correct, it can be difficult to get that quick timing from first to second dip. Yeah, so again, I think mastering that breathing with the like shadow kettlebelling, like without using a kettlebell at all, and getting the timing correct is really useful. And if you have never taken a video of yourself doing the kettlebell jerk or done it in front of a mirror, I highly recommend use a mirror for your practice. Take a look at what you're doing from the side, from the front. It's a little bit difficult from the side. That's why I would recommend like taking a video and then looking at it later and looking at it in slow motion and looking at what's happening. Because again, when you're doing the first dip, the goal is to prep yourself to go up and connect your hip or your elbow to your body, okay? And then you want to be extending, and you want to make sure that the kettlebell is not like way up here already when you're in your triple extension, because that means that you are pushing the kettlebell up with your arm. And what we're really doing in the jerk is your legs should be propelling your arm off, right? So you're maybe more here, and then you drop under, and you finish. Okay, and so how deep your second dip is, it's going to depend per person, and you might need to dip a little bit lower the heavier the kettlebell or the more fatigued that you get towards the end of a training set. YouTube Punk, your heels should not lift up on the first dip. That would kind of put you off balance and require you to set your heels back down before you drive up, because when you drive up, you're going to want to push off of you're going to want to like push from the heels onto the toes. So you should not be lifting your heels on the first dip. If you're noticing that you are lifting your heels, that actually is another very important area of mobility that people overlook for kettlebell sport training for swings for jerks is your ankle dorsiflexion. So you may want to look at that, but also again, that you are doing a slight, like your knees are like a slight plie, that your knees are also coming out, not just forward, okay? So that's gonna mean you don't quite need as much dorsiflexion as if you push your knees all the way forward. It's not about doing a really deep dip. The deeper first dip doesn't actually help you. It just needs to be connected in the right way. It just needs to be setting you up to propel yourself. Again, generally with a kettlebell jerk, you're not going to be using anything super, super heavy. You're not really going to be doing a 1 rep max jerk likely. That would probably be more like something you would do with a barbell. Generally, kettlebell jerks are used more for like conditioning or strength endurance. So you don't, your first dip, it doesn't, well again, even if you were lifting something heavy, having a really deep first dip doesn't actually help you. Any other questions? It's a good question. What other questions you guys have on the kettlebell jerk? Part of I think the challenge with some of these exercises like the kettlebell jerk, like the snatch, maybe even the swing to a certain extent, and why I think people want to see tutorials and have questions is because it takes a lot of focused practice to get these exercises, and it takes a long time. So, you know, you may be kind of looking for that one cue that could help, because sometimes there is that one cue you hear that kind of just helps you make the next step in the process. Because these exercises can take months and years to master, and really a lot of the work is going to come in your focus practice that you do. And by that I mean focus practice isn't when you're like doing your actual workout and you're like really working hard. That's just when you're doing your workout. The focus practice is the stuff you do with a light kettlebell, where you feel what you're doing, where you maybe video yourself and then you watch it and you see whether the visual and what you're feeling, you know, connect, or whether there's a disparity there, and then you try to, okay, I'm not doing this, on my next I'm gonna try to do this. You film it again, you do it again, you see if you did it. Like this focused practice where you're really paying close attention and being as present as you can so that you can make these little changes. And that's very difficult because it also requires being very present. In today's society, we also have lost our ability to like focus and be very present because of screens and everyone's short attention span. So that's the beauty of these exercises. They can help you really tune in and focus, but it's also part of the challenge of mastering them. YouTube Punk, yeah, I guess the jerk could be for lifting more than you can strict press. It could be for that, but generally I don't think you're going to be doing like a 1 rep max, I guess was my point with the jerk. Maybe, you know, maybe you would do 3 to 5 reps with heavier weight. Obviously, in my experience, I've mostly used the kettlebell jerk for endurance. I've never really used it as a strength exercise per se. Anonymous Game Warden, I don't know if that's a real question, but I have no idea. Okay, Old Grizz has a question. How do you lower from fixation? That's a good question. So from the overhead position, how are you going to come down? There's different ways you can do it. You could come down just straight to rack, like this. You could come down and absorb with your legs. You could come down, you could come up onto your toes to absorb the weight. Okay, so those are some different ones you're going to see. You're likely with a light weight, if you can, no reason to bend your knees if you don't need to, and if it feels okay for you, you could just come down, okay? But generally you're gonna notice for most like kettlebell sport lifters, if you see their sets and when they start getting heavier, they're likely either going to do this one or they're going to do this one. Okay, so the main thing is to make sure that your legs are straight again before your next rep. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to come down here and then try to do a first dip with your knees already bent, because that's not going to work out so well. So really, you're just letting gravity bring the bell down. So you're just bringing it like, you're just letting the bell fall and kind of getting out of the way, just kind of leaning back, letting the bell fall. And then again, if it's heavier, you're going to want to do something to do a little bit of absorbing so the kettlebell isn't just slamming into your body. Any other questions? Anonymous Game Warden, it may be a valid question. I don't know the answer to it. So you're gonna have to find your answer somewhere else. Maybe Google it. Any other questions? Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, YouTube Punk. It's like this person, I'm just assuming it's a dude, but I'm like, he wants me to try to fit my fist inside my mouth, and I'm not doing that. There's this interesting thing on Vertical Live where people want to come on and they want to see how they can like manipulate or control people and like just tell them to do things like shout blah, like shout woo, shout, you know, flex, do a pull up. It's like, no. Instinctively, I'm just like, no. You're telling me to do something? No. Gifted Artist, thanks for subscribing. I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm doing my best, south to west. We are having much less trolls since I have hidden a bunch of people and blocked them, so it's getting better and better. Old Grizz, good question. Do you recommend practicing jerk separate from clean and jerk? You can. It depends on what your goal is with it. So I think if you're specifically, again, if you're doing some focused technique practice, then yes, I would recommend just work on the jerk because it's less things to think about. But if if you like to also train clean and jerk, you could do that as well. But I think in some ways, if you're trying to adjust things in your jerk technique, I would recommend doing that in sort of a warm-up session or as part of your warm-up, like a little technique session where you just do the jerk, you just focus on it, and then you go, okay, now I'm going to do my workout, and you kind of just let that go, and you do your workout, whether the workout is with jerks or cleaner jerks or whatever you're doing. Yes, block and forget them. That's right. I know you have experience with that, YouTube punk. You asked, how light is the weight for practicing technique? Good question. So it depends, but I would say somewhere between 5 and 20 pounds. So it's going to depend kind of on your strength level. But I feel like 8 kg or 18 pounds is like a good weight to practice with because it's heavy enough that you can still feel it. Once you go down to like the, like even if you have a like 9 or 10 pound kettlebell, it's either not going to be a comp bell, so it's kind of uncomfortable in the rack, or even with a comp bell, it's just so light, it's a bit hard to feel it. But it can be a useful tool. But I would say between 5 and 20 pounds is a good weight to practice technique with. No, Damon, you cannot, and we're going to hide you. Lisa has a question. Are there kettlebell exercises to help with ballet turnout for adult beginners who are doing ballet and kettlebell solo? You could do a quick session in your platform. Good question. My thought on Damon definitely missed the last 5 minutes. So that was kind of funny. So my thought, Lisa, there on that is if you are learning ballet, like if you're just starting to learn ballet, or if you're a few years into a ballet journey as an adult and working on your turnout, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing other exercises that are also working on your turnout because I think it's kind of because it's already a new stimulus. I would say you probably have enough stimulus working on your turnout in ballet. So it's not necessarily what I would recommend. And it would depend on how frequently you're doing ballet. So if you're doing ballet a lot, you're getting plenty of turnout practice, and maybe your kettlebell practice should support kind of balancing out doing a lot of turnout work. Is there something specific, some specific muscle group that you're trying to strengthen for it, or you specifically mean like for your hips? It probably want to work on your like your hip mobility, I think would be a good place to work on versus like a specific kettlebell exercise, but working on improving like external rotation in your hips, but also working on your internal rotation because they affect each other. There's different exercises you can do for that, but working on both flexibility in your internal and external rotation, but also strength, isometric drills, mind-muscle connection for the internal and external rotation. You know what, Lisa? I'm going to add hip mobility to the list of YouTube live ideas. Hip mobility for internal and external rotation. Maybe we'll do that next week because that kind of sounds like a fun idea. Any other questions on the kettlebell jerk or kettlebell training in general? I'm also taking requests because I'm likely going to be choosing my topics for next week for YouTube Live. So hip mobility is going to rank right up there, Lisa, and we'll see if there's any other ideas. How do adults work on mind-muscle connections? That is a great question. So I think one of the best ways is to train, stretch, work out mindfully. So bringing awareness to what's going on. One thing that really helps with it is slowing down. So one of the things that I talked about a little bit on the last live was doing like a slow tempo. So for me, this was something that really helped me improve mind-muscle connection while doing the deadlift, was like doing a 4 count, really slow tempo on the way down, 4 count, really slow tempo on the way up. So I think slowing down is a huge one. I think turning off music when you're working out and tuning into your body is a huge one. And again, being mindful while you're working out. I think those are a couple of the keys to increasing mind-muscle connection, in addition to doing different activation or isolation drills. So for example, if you don't have great connection to your biceps, there's certain exercises or drills you could do that help you connect to your biceps. Often isometrics are a great way to do it. Having some kind of external tool to give you feedback, a band, the wall, maybe a weight. That can be a useful way as well. So, and again, if you're trying to say glutes, a lot of people have trouble feeling their glutes, right? There's different exercises you could do to help you activate and kind of isolate the glutes that will carry over to different exercises or things that you're doing. So I hope that's a helpful answer for you, Lisa. Old Grizz, no, I have not gotten it yet, but I need to check my mailbox. So I will check that and let you know. Any other questions? You're welcome, Lisa. I think actually ballet is a great way to improve your mind-muscle connection as well. A few years ago, I started taking adult ballet classes too, and I loved it, but then COVID happened, so the instructor continued doing it online for a while, which was really cool, but unfortunately didn't get to go back into the studio. But I felt it was really cool to learn ballet and felt that it had great carryover for just my mind-muscle connection. So that's awesome that you're doing ballet. Elena, thank you for your comment. You ran 2 marathons, you realize you need more leg strength. Okay, kettlebells for runners, absolutely, we can do that. We can absolutely talk about that. How long have you been doing ballet, Lisa? And Elena, if you want to share, what made you realize that you need more leg strength? Was there something specific that made you realize that you could benefit from that? Bruce Lee took ballet too. Yeah, it's a great way to learn good control of your body. South to West, you're a marathon runner as well. Okay, we got multiple marathon runners. Sounds like kettlebell training for runners might be a good one. Yeah, marathon used to be on my bucket list, but I ran a half marathon and kind of felt like, okay, that's good, but you never know. I might change my mind. I did read some different books once upon a time about all those ultra marathons, like Dean Karnazes and these different, I think that's his name, that run these just 100-mile long stuff. That stuff is crazy. I mean, that's just like a huge mental battle, and it becomes a lot more than just physical at that point. It's probably similar in a marathon, but just that on steroids with the ultra marathon. Any other questions you guys have about the jerk or push press or the press? Yeah, half marathon is plenty long. I think around mile 8, I just kind of like, my legs just started feeling dead and I didn't think I could finish, but I kind of like slogged through it for a few miles and then felt a little bit better by the end. Okay, Elena, yeah, I see you ran 2 marathons back to back. It was easy cardio and pulmonary, but your legs and hips in particular are weakest link. Yeah, I think doing some strength training can be really helpful for runners, just to reduce the risk of injury and to strengthen everything up so you can handle more. And so, you know, you're more balanced because you probably have, like you said, a great cardiovascular fitness, but maybe, you know, having a little bit more muscle would help you and give you a bit of a buffer so that your body feels better. Oh, that's cool, Lisa. You've been doing ballet for a few months. Very uncoordinated, but you like the total difference from desk work, and it's mentally and physically challenging. Absolutely. One of the things I noticed when I took ballet classes was how weak and uncoordinated my feet are, because the instructor would do these things with her feet that were so fast I couldn't even like watch it. Like I couldn't even turn my head quick enough to watch her foot move that fast, much less move my own foot that fast. So that was very, very humbling. And also like, wow, like dancers have such great control and connection to their feet compared to the rest of us who don't train them. And you know, I do some mobility and things for it, but nothing compared to what dancers do. Hi Hamid, thanks for joining. Yeah, that's right, YouTube Punk. From there, you can simply imagine the next half. Yeah, I'm sure though. The thing is that I think the biggest difference for me with marathon or the half marathon is, for a marathon, I feel like you really have to put in serious training. For a half marathon, you've got to train a bit, but you maybe could do it without doing a ton of serious training. But I feel like a marathon, like you have to seriously train, or you're just not going to be able to make it. And that's maybe not a time commitment I want to make to running. I don't enjoy it enough for that. You're welcome, Elena. I appreciate you, and thanks for watching. Yeah, I think we got a couple good topics out of today's live that I think are interconnected, which is hip mobility, particularly like internal and external rotation. I feel like that's something that people kind of miss out on when they're doing their flexibility or hip work. And then strength training for runners, you know, or how you could do kettlebell strength training for runners. I think those things are connected. Both of those are important for running, but also for many, many other things. Would you say jerk is the most difficult kettlebell technique there is? I honestly think that the snatch is harder. I feel like personally it's harder for me. The jerk was never as difficult for me to get like the snatch was. But I think it can be the most difficult, especially if you have like some mobility limitations with it. Then it probably can feel like the most difficult because you're kind of working against yourself. It also like looks simple, but there are different parts to it that are that can be kind of awkward, especially if you come from a different style of strength training than kettlebells, and then you try to do the kettlebell jerk. It might feel very strange. So it is a challenging one. For me personally, I think that the snatch is more difficult than the jerk. Hi Armand, thanks for joining. Any other questions on the kettlebell jerk press or push press? Hamid, no, I am not a runner, but there's lots of runners in the chat. I used to be a runner, but I don't really run anymore, just occasionally up a hill if I feel like it. YouTube Punk, you said you finally got the snatch. Jerk is your next goal. Hey Brandon, thanks for joining. What do I recommend for improving mobility to get under the bells? Good question. I'll show you a few things, and then if you're looking for like a specific guideline for it, you can check out my website. I do have like an upper body mobility for kettlebell sport, which was specifically designed early on when I started doing online programs because I saw how many people struggled with the flexibility for jerk. But I would say, and I can absolutely talk about the second dip a little bit more and recap for other people who missed that part, Brandon. But what's important is you need to have, as far as your flexibility, is you want to have good shoulder flexion. That means you can lift your shoulder here without arching your lower back, okay? So you can get your arm overhead, and that you are able to extend your thoracic spine, okay? So it might start with as basic as bringing mobility and awareness, like we're bringing awareness and connection to your upper back, so like being able to round your upper back and then being able to like extend your upper back, and it's kind of like moving your rib cage back and forth. That's gonna help you. Your rib cage is pretty much connected to your upper spine. Okay, so it starts by bringing some connection and awareness there. One exercise that I really like, see if I have it. I don't have a foam roller. You can do this with a foam roller, but you can also do it with something like a yoga bolster. So what you would do is essentially, what you want to do is kind of tuck your pelvis under and engage your core so you're not arching your lower back, and then you're stretching and reaching through your upper back. And you're really thinking about reaching your arms up and the extension in your upper spine is not going to be as big of an extension as your lower back. Your lower back is much more flexible. Your upper spine, like your rib cage is connected. There's not as much movement, but you want to kind of lock your core and your lower back in place and then reach up, 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 and maybe over a little bit. And then the further you go this way, the bigger that stretch is going to get. Okay, and the further you go this way, it's going to be easier. And you can also do this, another really useful way to do this is if you have 2 lacrosse balls that you've duct taped together, they call it a peanut, and you put that on either side of your spine, and you kind of do that same reaching exercise. It can also be helpful to work with, like, against the wall. And kind of like a weird, I'm going to just use this, but say there's a wall in front of you and kind of working on bringing your chest towards the wall. Another great one is if you have, this is a little bit low, but if you had a box working on your shoulder mobility here, so stretching, but also you could do isometrics here where you push down into the bolster and then you attempt to lift your arms up, engaging the upper back, because it's going to be a mix of building flexibility in your shoulders and upper back, but also building like strength and connection and being able to contract the muscles there. It's what's going to help you keep that range of motion. Let me know if you have any other questions about that, Brendan. Old Grizz said doing kettlebell halos and mace 360s really helped with shoulder mobility. Absolutely, doing loaded exercises can be really helpful for improving mobility as well. Lisa, you're saying you'd like 5-minute exercise snacks for desk workers to get during the workday to counteract sitting at a desk. That's a great idea. Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate that. I also want to address your other question, Brandon, about you were asking about the second dip. Let me know if you have a specific question, but I'm going to talk you through that a little bit. So for anybody who missed, we're going to recap a little bit on the jerk. So on your first dip, it's important to think about getting your elbow connected to your hip or to your body. Okay, so that's your first dip. You're setting yourself up. Your knees are coming slightly outward, and you're connecting your elbow to your hip, and your knees are coming forward a little bit. Okay, so that's your first dip. Then you're going to have your launch, okay, or your triple extension, where you launch up. You're launching, and I'm doing this in slow-mo. You're launching your arm and the kettlebell with your hip. Okay, that's going to launch it up, and then with your second dip, you're going to drop underneath. Okay, so your second dip looks very different from your first dip, right? You're here on your first dip. On your second dip, you're here because now the kettlebell is up and slightly behind you, so you want your hips back to be underneath the weight of that kettlebell. And yes, that second dip is the most challenging position on your mobility or on your flexibility. So if mobility or flexibility is a big challenge for you, that is where I would recommend starting with to get better at the second dip is improving your mobility, because it's going to make it much easier to get into that position. The other thing, Brennan, that I would recommend if you're working on trying to get the different phases of the jerk correctly is working on it body weight, or like with a shadow belling, okay? Invisible kettlebell, okay? And practicing slow motion, getting the right position on the first dip, getting the right launch, dropping underneath the right way, standing tall, okay? And being able to do that slow motion first. If you can do it slow, you're much more likely to be able to do it fast. And over time, getting your speed up to regular speed. If you've got that down, if you got the right timing, you're much more likely to have success when you add a kettlebell or multiple kettlebells. Yeah, absolutely. Brennan, when I started doing a lot of coaching in San Diego back in 2014 when I moved down there for kettlebell sports specifically, the biggest challenge I noticed for almost everybody that was trying to learn the jerk, their struggle was mobility. So that's the biggest thing. If you can get even a little improvement in mobility, it's going to be much easier for you to do the exercise. Otherwise, you're kind of fighting against yourself. Yeah, Lisa, around the body, kettlebell solo exercises are great for shoulder mobility. One of the exercises I really like for chest opening or shoulder mobility is like a handcuff. So you can do this with a kettlebell. You can do it with a yoga strap if you've got one and you need to go wider, a towel. You can do it by clasping the hands open together, arms bent, arms straight. Great exercise to open up the chest. Not necessarily going to improve flexion, but it could if your pecs are tight, especially. I do notice that a lot of guys who have done a lot of strength training in the gym, a lot of bench pressing, you're going to have very tight pecs. And this is going to prevent you from being able to do this position as effectively because your pecs are tight. So you want to like stretch those pecs out, okay? Stretch them out. I was going to say something else about that. Oh, if you're working on improving your shoulder flexion, in addition to your thoracic spine extension, you also want to be looking at your internal and external rotation of your shoulders because your shoulder is a ball and socket joint, and if it's not able to roll and glide, it's going to limit the limit the range of motion of your shoulders in any range, in flexion, in extension, everywhere. So I highly recommend doing exercises that improve flexibility and mobility, like flexibility just being your ability to get, pushed into this position versus actively contracting into that position, being more of mobility or having strength within your range of motion. I do actually also have a program for overhead shoulder mobility specifically. So both of those programs would be helpful if you're looking for a specific routine that you should do or exercises that you should do that would help you get ready for the kettlebell jerk or just improve your shoulder mobility. I just dropped that in the chat. That's the overhead shoulder mobility. And then there's upper body mobility, which is a little bit more comprehensive, but both are good programs for that. Any other questions that you guys have on the kettlebell jerk, flexibility, or requests for next week? High on the list right now is hip mobility, kettlebell strength training for runners. We got a suggestion for movement snacks for desk workers. I highly recommend keeping a kettlebell in your office if you can and doing some exercises when you can because to your point, around the body exercises are a great exercise to do. Really simple, gets your heat up, gets your blood flowing, good for your shoulders, your arms, your core, your balance, okay? And you don't just have to do them like this. You could do them in a stagger stance, okay? If you really want to challenge yourself, you could do them in an inline stance. Or if you really want to challenge yourself, you could do them single leg. That's a tough one. Definitely want to have some practice on 2 legs before you try that one. But if you've never tried that one before and you have done some around the body handoffs, definitely give it a try. It's a fun one. Other questions? Anybody have any fun plans for their weekend? That's my question for you. Lisa, my cat's names are Santo and Cosmo. That's Santo, being real cute up there. Cosmo's over there. She's behind the curtain, laying in the sun. Old Grizz, you've got kettlebell lifting as your weekend plans. That's awesome. YouTube Punk, you're going to practice the kettlebell jerk. Nice. Yes, Santo. Where are your kitties? Are they just like in the other room? I always miss my cats when I leave my house for more than like two or 3 hours. I'm like, I want to go home. I want to see my cats. Hi there. Thanks for joining. I'm not sure what you're saying because YouTube didn't translate it, but Brandon, you're going to watch a barrel race in Fallon, Nevada. That sounds cool. That sounds awesome. I'd love to watch a barrel race. I don't have any major plans besides meal prep. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, YouTube punk. Losing a pet is the worst. The worst part about having a pet is knowing that you'll likely outlive your pet. And then, yeah, I try not to think about that too much, but sometimes I get sad thinking about it. My cats are only like 3 years old, but still don't want to think about that. Oh, Ginger and Juno. Those are great names. R.I.P. Old Grizz, yes, I have used a Bulgarian bag. Bulgarian bags are awesome. I have one. It's just in a box in my room because I don't use it a lot. But love like Bulgarian bag 360s. Bit tough to learn. It was tough for me to learn and get that down, but great workout for your entire body. Besides the 360s, honestly, I don't love a lot of the other Bulgarian bag moves. Like, I don't love like the cleans and snatches with a Bulgarian bag. I think they're quite awkward. And then other moves, you know, kind of normal, like if you put it on your shoulders and do squats or different things. But I really like just like either a side to side or like the 360s. I feel like that's the most valuable Bulgarian bag exercise, in my opinion, that I can't get from a different tool. Oh, nice. You're going to make a Bulgarian bag. That's awesome. I'm like, that rings a bell. Definitely there was, I'm trying to remember where, somewhere along my journey, there was someone making a Bulgarian bag with a tire inner tube. What are you going to make? What are you going to use for the handles, though? Elena, my cats, they eat very well. Plenty of taurine. I appreciate your suggestion. I hope they live very long as well. I was trying to think if there was some other fun fitness tool I could show you guys, but anybody use a slant board? Anybody use one of these? That's a fun one. Like squats, like really gets your quads, this one. Or you could stretch with it, I guess. You know, knees over toes training is kind of all the rage since the knees over toes guy. Yeah, I wonder if that I'll be curious to hear how that works for you. The paracord handle sounds like a good idea. Brandon, you have not tried the slant board. It's a fun tool. It's a cool tool to have. Betha, you want to see the kettlebell? Like this kettlebell? This is a very awesome pink lightning bolt kettlebell. Oh, cool. A DIY calf stretch block that you're going to make. That's cool. Calf stretch like you stand on it to stretch your calves, or something kind of like that. That's good to know. Good tutorials on DIY. I was gifted a Bulgarian bag by one of my students, which was very generous of him. Thank you, Gary. He gave me one years ago, so I have one. The one downside of it is that the handles are a little bit smooth, so they can get slippery if your hands get sweaty. It's the one downside. I just don't use it long enough. Just don't use it long enough to get really sweaty, and then it works fine. Hi, Johnny. Thanks for joining us. Let us know if you have any questions on kettlebell jerks or kettlebell training. Got a few minutes left here, so if you guys have any other questions that you want to ask about kettlebell training or suggestions you want for lives next week, let me know. We're coming right up on an hour here, and I usually go like, once it gets too far past an hour, we're like, all right, got to move on. Okay, Johnny, you just do bodybuilding workouts, you're new to live. That's cool. I think whatever style of training you enjoy and do consistently is awesome. I do think bodybuilding is a really useful style of training to get good connection to the different muscle groups and understand how to contract them and use them in different exercises. That's cool, YouTube Punk. How did you make your kettlebells? Are you a welder? You're welcome, old Grizz. Thanks for being here, and thanks for participating, and thanks for sending the book. I'll take a look and see if it has arrived yet. Awesome, Brennan. I'm glad this was helpful for you. Sounds good. Let me know if you have any questions on the program. And we'll probably do a long cycle or clean and jerk tutorial in the future, so stay tuned. I usually go live 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. They're at different times, kind of trying to allow for different times of the day that people might be available. Basketball plus concrete plus PVC handle. Wow. That sounds quite interesting. So is it like, it sounds like it's probably pretty big. Like it's got like a large handle probably. All right, well, I think we're fresh out of questions. Yeah, definitely send me a pic. I don't know what SARMS is, Jacob. You can let me know what that, is that when I'm Googling it, it says it's a selective androgen receptor modulator. If so, today is my first time knowing what that is, so I don't have any opinion. I don't know what it is. Besides, I don't recommend doing drugs. What's a SARM board? Is that something else? I have no idea. I feel like I learn new things every day when I do a live because people ask me about things that I had no idea what they even were. I feel like I'm somewhat well informed on things, but apparently not on that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and log off. If you guys have any other suggestions on the live, then for next week, then let me know in a comment on one of my videos or send me an email. Otherwise, thank you guys for joining. Have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend. I'll see you next week, Monday, 1 p.m. Pacific time.